If everything in your life stayed exactly the same for the next 5 years, the same income, the same habits, the same routines, the same results, would you feel a deep sense of pride rising in your chest? Or would there be a quiet frustration you try to ignore? A voice inside whispering that you were meant for more, but never claimed it? That question is not meant to comfort you. It is meant to confront you. Because buried inside, it is a truth that most people spend their entire lives running from. The life you are living right now is not an accident, not a coincidence, and not simply the result of circumstances beyond your control. It is, in large part, the outcome of the standards you have accepted and the responsibilities you have either embraced or avoided. And I know that may sound harsh, because it is easier, far easier, to point outward, to blame the economy, the environment, the lack of opportunities, the people who didn't support you, the system that feels unfair. Blame is seductive. It gives you relief in the moment. It allows you to protect your pride and justify your position. But at the same time, it quietly steals something from you that is far more valuable than comfort. It steals your power. Because the moment you decide that something outside of you is the reason you cannot move forward, you have also decided that something outside of you must change before your life can. And that is a dangerous place to live. But here is where everything shifts. And I want you to really hear this. If your choices, your actions, your mindset have contributed to where you are, then that means you also hold the ability to change where you are going. That is not weakness. That is not blame. That is ownership. And ownership is the birthplace of transformation. Every person who has ever built something meaningful, every person who has ever broken out of limitation, every person who has ever rewritten their story, reached a moment where they stopped asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and started asking, "What can I do about it?" That shift may seem small on the surface, but it is massive in its impact, because it moves you from being a passive observer of your life to being an active creator of it. And once you step into that role, once you truly accept that your decisions carry weight, that your habits are shaping your future, that your discipline or lack of it is determining your direction, something inside you begins to wake up. Something stronger than fear, louder than doubt, and more powerful than any excuse you have ever held onto. That awakening does not arrive as a burst of motivation or a sudden dramatic breakthrough. It often begins quietly, almost unnoticeably, in the small moments when you choose responsibility over reaction, when you decide to pause instead of complain, when you replace the question, "Why is this happening to me?" with, "What is this trying to teach me?" And in those moments, you start to realize that accountability is not a burden placed on your shoulders, but a tool placed in your hands. Think about two individuals standing at the same crossroads, both facing setbacks that feel heavy and unfair. One of them folds under the weight, convinced that the world has singled them out, that their circumstances are proof they cannot win. And so they retreat into frustration, repeating the same patterns, waiting for something external to change. The other person, feeling the same disappointment, the same sting of failure, makes a different decision. They choose to lean in, to examine what went wrong without sugarcoating it, to confront their own gaps in skill, discipline, or strategy, and then to do something about it. Over time, that choice compounds in ways that are almost invisible at first, but undeniable later. Weeks turn into months, and months turn into years, and suddenly, the gap between these two lives becomes enormous. Not because one had better luck, but because one accepted responsibility while the other avoided it. This is the dividing line between those who remain stuck and those who move forward. It is not intelligence alone, not talent alone, not even opportunity alone. It is the willingness to own the outcome, regardless of how uncomfortable that ownership feels. Consider the story of someone who loses a job unexpectedly. In that moment, it is easy to feel powerless, to focus on the loss, to replay the injustice over and over again. But accountability introduces a different path. It asks harder questions. What skills were missing? What value could have been increased? What preparation could have created a safety net? These questions are not meant to shame. They are meant to sharpen. Because once those answers are found, action becomes possible. New skills can be learned. New opportunities can be created. New directions can be explored. And this is where the transformation begins to take shape. Not in grand declarations, but in consistent, intentional steps forward. You begin to understand that effort alone is not enough. That being busy is not the same as being effective. And that results require alignment between what you do and what actually works. This realization can be uncomfortable, even humbling, because it forces you to let go of the idea that trying is always enough. But in exchange, it gives you something far more valuable: clarity. And with clarity comes focus. And with focus comes progress. And with progress comes momentum that starts to carry you beyond the limits you once believed were permanent. And as that momentum builds, something even more powerful begins to take shape within you. Something that cannot be easily shaken by setbacks or slowed down by temporary defeat. You start to see failure differently, not as an endpoint, not as a verdict on your ability, but as information. Clear, direct, and brutally honest feedback that shows you exactly where you need to grow. Most people fear failure because they attach their identity to it, because they believe that a failed attempt means they are not capable, not worthy, not meant for something greater. But accountability breaks that illusion. It separates who you are from what happened, and in doing so, it gives you the freedom to learn without losing your sense of self. Imagine a pilot navigating through a violent storm, turbulence shaking the aircraft, visibility limited, pressure rising with every passing second. The pilot does not sit there blaming the storm, wishing it away, or questioning why it appeared. The pilot adjusts, recalibrates, trusts the instruments, and stays focused on the destination. That is the mindset of someone who takes full responsibility. Life will bring storms, unexpected and often inconvenient, but your response to those storms is what determines your direction. There are countless real-world examples of individuals who faced repeated setbacks before achieving success, not because they were immune to failure, but because they refused to let failure define them. They treated each mistake as a lesson, each rejection as redirection, each obstacle as an opportunity to refine their approach. This is not blind optimism. It is disciplined thinking. It is the understanding that every outcome, whether positive or negative, carries data that can be used to improve your next move. And when you begin to operate from that perspective, your relationship with effort changes. You no longer chase quick wins or immediate validation. You commit to the process, knowing that consistency, not intensity, is what creates lasting results. Small actions, repeated daily, begin to compound in ways that are almost invisible at first, but unstoppable over time. Waking up when you said you would, following through on commitments even when motivation fades, choosing growth over comfort in moments when it would be easier to stay the same. These are the decisions that build discipline. And discipline, when sustained, creates freedom. It gives you control over your time, your finances, your direction, and ultimately your life. You begin to realize that freedom is not something handed to you by circumstance, but something earned through consistent responsibility. And as this realization settles in, it reshapes the way you see yourself. You are no longer waiting for permission, no longer dependent on perfect conditions, no longer defined by past limitations. You become someone who acts, who adapts, who builds, who moves forward regardless of uncertainty. And in that transformation, you discover a truth that changes everything. The more responsibility you are willing to carry, the more power you gain to shape your future into something far greater than you once believed possible.